Bitcoin and the altcoins are expected to see a significant correction take place during the summer. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly when I anticipate that to happen so that you can take some profits off the table beforehand. But don't worry, that's a good few months away from happening. And right now, the Bitcoin price is looking to push higher at any moment. And because of this chart looking like it's going to dump off the face of a cliff at any moment, the altcoins are set for massive price expansion as well. So if you want to understand how to make some of the biggest gains over the next few months ahead and prepare for that dip that's going to come in the summer before the major bull market blow off top towards the end of this year, then hit the like button and let's get into today's video. Now guys, before you rush down below and say, oh, you've been bullish over these past few months and now you're flipping bearish, absolutely not. I'm more bullish than ever, especially in the short term. And yes, we will see a bit of a correction in the summer if you understand why it's going to happen and you can prepare for it accordingly. So that's what we're doing a good few months ahead so that you don't have to panic like little Timmy and everyone else when the markets suddenly do something you weren't expecting. So before we find out exactly when we can expect to see that correction, let's just understand something else across the broader market. People have been talking about sell in May and stay away, but obviously we didn't fall into that trap because we knew something that maybe they didn't. This has been common over the last bull market and across the stock market as well because of various reasons. Now, it happened in the last bull market because it was a post-election year, like this year, but this time is different. So why is this time different and why will we go up through May and up into June and beyond? Well, because of Donald Trump. Usually when you have a new president roll in, everyone around the world goes, okay, the US has a new president. We can start going back to printing money to refinance our debts and all that good stuff, which is what the M2 money supply is all about, why that continues higher. This time was different because Donald Trump rolled in and started to push tariffs. This was pretty worrying and it meant that we had a really strong dollar, which meant all the other countries around the world were like, well, can we print money yet? Not really sure. And this meant that we had a pretty quiet start to the year as the M2 money supply took a nosedive. And if you're wondering, that's why Bitcoin and the altcoins have been going down over the past few months until April when they started to go up once more. Now, in the past bull market, we saw this correction take place in May time rather than earlier on in the year. So we've got that correction out of the way and we're not likely to see another correction take place until somewhere during the summer. So where are we right now and can we anticipate going higher sooner rather than later? Well, because Bitcoin's following this global M2 money supply and you can see that right now we are in line with this particular area on the M2 money supply. If I take this chart away, you can see that Bitcoin and the altcoins was somewhere around this area back in December time. And that's where we saw Bitcoin at all-time highs. We saw many other altcoins pumping up like XRP, Sui, Solana, etc. We're about to return back towards that zone, but right now we don't quite have the kind of greed in the markets that push us to quite the same level. So we're near enough at those levels, but not quite. See, we would expect to see this near 90 or 95 if we were expecting to see a further sell-off, but we have a lot of runway ahead, which is very positive. So as you can see, the M2 money supply expands significantly beyond this point, telling us that Bitcoin and the altcoins will be going to all-time highs and beyond before sometime around the end of June. Which really isn't far away because right now it's the 13th of May. And yes, the altcoins will expand aggressively with it. Why? Because the fear and greed index basically goes up. People get more and more confident every time. We've seen it in the last few weeks, okay? I've been talking about altcoins for months and months, telling you that these are altcoins that you should be looking into. No one's been going and buying them. No one's really been paying attention. I made a video on some of them just a couple of days ago and everyone aped in and some of them went up 60 or 70%. If you just paid attention to what I've been saying over the last month or two, you wouldn't have been forced to do that. Okay, but this is showing the greed return to the markets. Now, this is the Bitcoin dominance plus USDT dominance plus USDC dominance, okay? As you can see on this weekly chart, it's running into this area of resistance, okay? This is a very, very significant area of resistance because it indicates over the past few years when we've had major altcoin seasons. And yes, we can start an altcoin season and have a correction in the summer in the middle of altcoin season. It's absolutely normal, okay? Because in the last bull market, you can see they had a major altcoin season before this correction, and then it jumped back down again, which is what sent the altcoins bananas. So short term, Bitcoin looks incredibly bullish. Altcoins also look very, very bullish. So what's been going on in the past few days and why are we seeing a bit of a sell-off? Well, because Bitcoin's come up incredibly fast, which has meant that we've started to see a bit of loss of momentum, which is usually fairly understandable as the buyers get a bit exhausted. And I posted about this around 22 hours ago when Bitcoin was around nearly $104,000, saying that there was a bearish divergence, showing that the momentum was weakening while the price was climbing higher. So if you missed this, and if you ended up getting into a trade that you shouldn't have got into or whatever, then make sure you're following me, Peter_THOC, over on Twitter. Okay, this is a new Twitter page because obviously I lost the other one to hackers. Hopefully I'll get that back at some point. By the way, if you work for Twitter, please, I am literally begging you, please come and send me a DM over here, because I really need your help, and I'll make it worth your while if you can get me my Twitter page back. So how are we able to predict a correction that's going to happen in the summer? Well, you might be like, well, obviously he's going to show me the M2 money supply, and you are right, okay? But actually, the M2 money supply isn't so clear on the short term as to when we might see that correction, because if we look back to the last bull market, you might see something very similar. M2 money supply goes up and up and up and never really shows any major corrections on here, the global M2 money supply. Here you can see that. And yes, you can see a kind of a minor kind of sideways action happening here, which is basically into July, but I don't think this is necessarily showing us the full story. And that's because, very much like this, the M2 money supply, the global one, is mainly driven by two countries that kind of mislead the data. Now, if you go to tradingview.com and you go to indicators and you write M2 money shift for Bitcoin, then it's going to bring up this one. You know, you have to go to the 12-week delay, and that's going to give you this chart. Now, just while I'm on this, because this is really driving me nuts, I've seen other YouTubers and Twitter just banging on time and time again about the M2 money supply. And I'm not talking about Raoul Pal, okay? Raoul Pal's the OG when it comes to the M2 money supply, okay? Because he was the one who kind of found this model in the very first place and its correlation with crypto and risk assets. He's basically saying it's a loose guide to kind of follow the trend. But people who are referring to this on the daily basis completely disregard what they're saying, because it's insane. If you're looking at this on the daily basis, you deserve to get burnt, okay? It's a weekly chart. It gives you accuracy to within a week or two, but it shouldn't be used for you trying to make day trades and stuff like that. It's literally insane. There's just a few one-trick ponies out there who've got nothing else to talk about, who just keep focusing on this. So yeah, you heard it here. Now then, where is the clue to this? Well, if you're subscribed to this channel, then you probably understand where we're going with this. The M2 money supply is a global thing. It's made up of different M2s from different countries. And this is kind of misleading, because if you look at like the US M2 on its own, you could see that this just goes up forever and it never seems to correct. Well, eventually it corrects, but it does this a very long time after bull markets have finished, and a very long time after bull markets have started does it start to go to the upside. You can also see that like China M2, another very big contributor to this, also kind of overruns and goes way beyond bull markets. Yes, it contributes to the bull market, but the major correction that happened last time didn't really happen until the Bitcoin bull market had finished. However, we can see a lot of correlation between the Japan M2 and the Bitcoin charts, particularly when we look at the correction. In the last bull market, you can see the price corrects here as the Japan M2 corrects, like here, and you see this major bull market end happens here as the Japan M2 basically nosedives off a cliff as well. So the Japan M2 was the major indicator here. Now you can see that it does kind of correct and carry on back up here, which is what leads to this. This is Japan M2. Also, if you use the EU M2, that also shows when these corrections kind of take place as well. Okay, so you can see this takes place. Now, I'm not necessarily anticipating that we see a correction at this scale on our charts, because again, we saw a lot of that bearish pain and stuff being brought out at the beginning of the year. So Donald Trump knocked a lot of the wind out of the sails of a bull market. He knocked a lot of the greed out that was existing in crypto and wider markets back in December time, which meant that we had that correction nice and early, and now we're starting to see markets build again. But what am I seeing happen here? Well, you've probably already seen it. This is the EU M2 money supply. Major dump back down on the 7th of July. Now, this isn't the 7th of July, by the way. This is front-running crypto by about 12 weeks, okay? 12 weeks ahead. You can go and put this onto your chart by hitting that cog button. This is the same reason that like Ben Cowan and others have struggled to kind of identify why the M2 and the global M2 keeps going higher but Bitcoin sells off. The secret sauce is that it's very closely correlated to like the Japan M2 and EU M2. Okay, so we see that correction take place because of EU M2. Right now, you can see EU M2 is falling off the face of a cliff, which means that we could expect to see a correction sometime into sort of July time. I've heard other people saying August, but if this continues lower and we start to see Japan M2 also doing the same, then this would be where we start to see our likely correction. Japan M2 doing something very, very similar here. This is what's telling me that sometime into July, things are going to get a little bit interesting. Now, you can see something as well, that these fall off around the 7th of July, okay? So what do we like to see before this happens, and what would be a good time to tell us that maybe we want to take some profits? Now, I'm not saying sell all your crypto completely, okay? But it might be a good idea to take some profits if the market's getting very hot by then. And it's likely to get very hot by then because of this rally that's going to take place here. We will likely then see the fear and greed index by that point climbing to around 90 to maybe 95 or beyond. People telling you everywhere, screaming to buy altcoins, screaming to do this, screaming to do that. But remember, this bull market isn't going to finish until sometime into November, December. You can't just go up in a straight line because people get greedier and greedier, people enter more and more leverage trades, and it causes real instability in price. Basically, if everyone is opening leverage trades, it pushes the price much higher than it should be because not that many people own the asset. If everyone is making bets on something going higher and higher and higher, but that asset isn't actually worth that much money, it comes down. That's what happened in 2008 financial crisis with those CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. If you've ever watched The Big Short, it should describe to you in more detail that kind of gamble. Okay, where the gamble is way bigger than the actual value of the market. So once we get towards the 7th of July, if we see loads and loads of retailers flooding back into the space, we see sky-high prices for crypto coins, we see the funding rates here on coinglass.com looking very orange, and like there's loads and loads of volume back in the markets and people going really big into leverage, this is another indicator that taking a little bit of profits off the table is a good plan. Now, again, I'm not saying sell all your crypto, because maybe, just maybe, I'm wrong. In which case, maybe I would just want to move some funds back into Bitcoin, or maybe a less volatile asset, like a larger cap, than being in like lots of smaller cap coins. And also, another very key point to notice is that we don't know yet just how long this is going to go on for. If this goes on for, let's say, multiple weeks, rather than just like 1 or 2 weeks like it's been doing there, then we can anticipate a longer, bigger pullback. The bigger pullbacks tend to come for these when we see multiple kind of weeks of pullback or multiple months of pullback. When we see like these sort of short-term blips like this, it doesn't really have much more than a 3 or 4 week pullback for Bitcoin and the alts. But even in this one here, we saw Bitcoin pulling back about 31%. And you could likely see the altcoins pulling back 40 to 50% during that period of time. So Bitcoin, for example, recently only pulled back 30%, but it did take a longer period of time. So I don't think we'll see quite such an aggressive sell-off in the altcoins. It's more the long period of time that kills off the alt. Now, but think about this as a scenario. If you can get up here and you can take some profits off of coins that have been performing really strongly, like the SUIs or the Ethereums or Bitcoin or whatever it is, and you could just wait for a big pullback to happen, 50% or whatever, and then you put your money back in, imagine how much more money you can make by the end of the year by doing this, okay? And if, for whatever reason, we don't see this kind of continue higher and it just does this, it's not going to do this, but just in case, then you basically sold the top, and the top comes in the summer. I don't think the top comes in the summer. I think it comes from the end of October, maybe until sometime into December. But again, we'll use one of these models to give us more education into that over the time ahead. Now, if you want to stay up to date and you want to know exactly when I'm going to be taking profits, etc., then make sure you're subscribed to the House of Crypto, notification bell turned on. Follow me over on Twitter as well so that you don't miss a beat like this, which we've been talking about over the last few days, and things will become much easier for you, okay? Now, this is not a time to be emotional. Right now, you're going to see the market continue to go up higher. We will see minor pullbacks from time to time. They happen because of whatever reason. Just don't panic, okay? Just stay calm. Your goal is to just be in this market, come out this market if you want. Now, if you're wondering what kind of correction we can expect to see, I think it's going to look very similar to what we saw for the Bitcoin bull market back in 2017. Which, if you remember, was the last time that Donald Trump was the president of the United States and basically did the same thing, where he rolled in, created tariffs that meant that the dollar pumped up, caused the M2 money supply to decrease, and ultimately led to a bull market that came later in the year. Now, if you look at this, there was a correction back in June where Bitcoin price fell from $2,950 all the way down to $1,900, which was around 34%, which actually isn't that big, because at the time, Bitcoin was a fraction of the value it's at right now. Then you can see that the next major correction comes in during the summer. And this is what I'm anticipating happening this time. This time it moved from around the 28th of August and it fell by 40%. I think this is something that we're going to see in sort of July time, possibly into August. But look at what follows it. This is the most explosive kind of phase of the bull market, is the final phase. That final phase is what we're hoping to get after that kind of correction in the summer is done. And that final phase comes because liquidity is in a massive expansion phase, and the global markets, because of liquidity flooding the markets, as well as because of the business cycle and other bits and pieces, basically goes into a risk on environment. It means that everyone starts to take bigger and bigger, more dangerous risks. Bitcoin and the altcoins are just that part of the risk curve. As we move down the risk curve in towards riskier assets, this is why Bitcoin and crypto will expand aggressively at the end of the cycle. Right now, we are seeing us move towards that cycle. There will be minor corrections along the way. But this is why you shouldn't be too worried about these corrections, because they're not that big a deal. Now, obviously, something to think about that I don't really touch on here is taxes and the implications of taxes. That if you go and sell all your cryptos in the summer and you try and rebuy them, etc., there is tax implications. Now, I don't cover them on this channel. Why? Because some of you are from America, others from Australia, others from the UK. You're all from different places. You all have different rules on tax. So that's why I don't really cover it, because it's not really suitable for my entire audience. If you want to find out more about Australian crypto tax, go and search for it. US, same detail, whatever. Now, obviously, I don't pay tax because I obviously have a business in Dubai, but also just use non-KYC exchanges because then a lot of my minor transactions, etc., aren't really being tracked. Obviously, go and look into whether or not that affects you in the country you're in and, you know, different legal and tax things around that. But this is personally why I use non-KYC exchanges. If you want to use the exchanges that I personally use, then I highly recommend that you go and use Bitunix or WEEX, which are both linked down below in the description. Both of these exchanges are non-KYC, which means you don't have to register your details. You can go onto these exchanges, send the money, trade that money, and then send it off to somewhere else whenever you want to cash out. They also both come with huge deposit bonuses. I've been working with these exchanges a long time, so I have pretty much the best deposit bonuses available. So if you want to go and create a new account using this, you can have multiple accounts and you can use this one so that you can access the deposit bonus by signing up through my link. Also, you'll be able to access all the different altcoins I personally talk about on a daily and weekly basis. Guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure you have a fantastic week. Things will start to get really exciting once more. Just make sure your emotions don't overtake, because that's where the biggest mistakes are made. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and have a great day. Bye-bye.